They didn't even let him say goodbye. One minute, he stood in front of the Galactic Council, hands cuffed in that glowing green metal that burned into his wrists like acid. And the next, he was shoved into a pod and launched toward a death world with nothing but a prison uniform and a one-way ticket to hell. No trial, no defense, just a cold voice announcing, guilty, sentence, death by exile. They called the planet Kargath, a world with an atmosphere toxic to most known species, storms that ripped through the crust, wildlife that tore through ships like paper. They said nothing survived down there, not tech, not man, not memory. It was the galaxy's dirty little solution for inconvenient problems, not important enough to execute publicly, too dangerous to leave alive. Send them to Kargath, let the planet do the killing, clean, silent. Forgotten. He was supposed to be just another corpse, but he came back. The return wasn't silent. It started with a beacon, faint, static-heavy. Origin, Kargath. Coordinates, moving. Then came the surveillance drone. Eyes wide. Feed broadcasting to every backroom of power across the core systems. The signal was distorted at first. Clouds, ash, and that blood-red sky Kargath was famous for. But then the figure came into view. Walking. Not limping. Not crawling. Walking. His uniform was torn, burnt, stained with things not even science could name. His beard had grown thick, jaw lined with cracked skin and dried blood. One eye swollen shut, but the other burned, alive, defiant. He walked toward the drone and looked straight into it. Not with fear, not with madness, with purpose. And then he spoke. Voice, raw, low, and slow like gravel grinding against steel. Tell them I'm coming home. The council tried to spin it. Impossible, one said. Must be a clone, another insisted. But deep down, every one of those polished, plastic-souled politicians felt it. They failed. He was supposed to die on Kargath, torn apart by beasts, swallowed by sinkholes, choked by the storms. Instead, he had survived what no one ever had. Not with weapons, not with tech, with rage, with betrayal chewing through his insides like fire. The betrayal of those he trusted, the ones who called him commander in the war, the ones who raised their glasses with him after the peace treaty, the ones who smiled to his face, then signed the order to throw him away like garbage. Because he knew too much, because he questioned too loudly. Because truth was dangerous in a galaxy built on lies. They met him at the docks, 36 soldiers, full gear, heavy plasma rifles, drones circling. Every gun pointed at the ramp of the battered dropship that somehow made it out of Kargath's orbit. The metal hissed open. He stepped out. No armor, no weapon. Just his body, scarred, changed, hardened. One of the soldiers, the captain, young, nervous, raised a trembling hand. You are to come with us for medical and psychological evaluation. He smiled. That slow, crooked smile that didn't touch his eyes. You can try. But they didn't shoot. They saw something in his eyes, something older than Kargath, something that stared back and made their hands tremble. They lowered their rifles without knowing why. He walked past them, every step echoing like a countdown. He didn't need guns. He was the weapon now. Now he stood once again at the gates of the Galactic Council. The same marble steps, the same silver doors, only this time there were no chains, no cuffs, no guards, just him, and the building full of judges who had already sentenced him once. Only difference was, this time he wasn't alone inside his skin. Kargath had taken something from him, but it had also given him something back, and they were going to learn exactly what that was. The council chamber looked the same, ornate marble floors, glowing banners of every allied species, holographic crests spinning above each judge's high-backed seat. Peaceful, polished, powerful, fake, just like before. He walked through the main aisle with no escort. The silence was thick. 100 pairs of alien and human eyes followed him from behind titanium glass screens and reinforced balconies. Whispers flickered like static. They stared at him like they were watching a ghost. No, not a ghost. A mistake. He was supposed to be gone. He was supposed to be dead. And yet there he was, the man the galaxy had flushed down the black hole of Kargath, standing tall, shoulders broad, eyes colder than any Deathworld frost. He stopped at the center. Didn't bow, didn't kneel, didn't even blink. Just stared up at them. The High Council of the Galactic Accord. 12 judges. 12 traitors in gold-trimmed robes. At the center sat the chief arbiter, an ancient thing with a long neck, folded arms, and skin like cracked leather. It hadn't aged a day. Neither had its hypocrisy. The arbiter spoke first, voice metallic, artificially neutral. By universal law, you are not authorized to be in this chamber. You were sentenced to death by exile on Kargath. No appeals were permitted. No return was possible. He didn't answer immediately, just took a slow breath. And then, softly, like a man pulling the pin on a grenade, he said, "You were wrong." That alone sent a ripple through the room. The arbiter narrowed its cold, glassy eyes. "We are never wrong." His laugh cracked the silence like a whip, low, dry, bitter. "You judged me without trial. You exiled me without a defense. You sent me to a hellhole with no resources, no protection, and no honor. And now I'm here, breathing, standing in front of you. And all you can say is you're never wrong." If you weren't wrong. He leaned forward just enough for the edge in his voice to cut deeper. "Then what the hell am I doing here?" The truth was, they didn't have an answer, because behind every smug expression and neutral tone was the same thing. Fear. He could smell it. Kargath had sharpened his senses to something primal. He could hear the judges' irregular heartbeats, see the sheen of sweat along the temples of the human representatives, and the nervous tail twitches of the reptilian ones. They knew. He shouldn't be alive. But he wasn't just alive, he was calm, controlled, deadlier than ever. The arbiter tried to take control again. "Do you intend to present a legal challenge, or is this a political stunt?" That did it. He stepped closer, right up to the center podium, and placed his palm on it. The panel hissed, scanned his biosignature, and turned green. Identity confirmed. The system recognized him, even after all this time. "No challenge," he said. "I'm not here to play your game. I'm here to tell the truth. And once I'm done, you can either kill me properly this time, or explain to the entire galaxy why a man you sentenced to death came back wearing the blood of your secrets." That sent murmurs into the chamber. Some judges stiffened. Others whispered into comlinks. He had their attention. Good. Now came the part he'd been rehearsing every night for 6 years, under blood-red skies, sleeping on broken stone, listening to predators howl in the dark. "The mission to Kargath, 6 years ago," he began, voice steady. "You said I violated the rules of engagement during the siege of the Drekar crater, that I issued an unauthorized orbital strike on a civilian zone, that I went rogue." He looked straight at Judge Orlin, the military representative, a bald, broad-shouldered man who once served beside him, now hiding behind medals and silence. "You filed the report," he said, eyes locked. "You said I lost control, but the logs tell a different story." He reached into the folds of his shredded uniform and pulled out a crude, rust-covered device, barely functional, patched with bone and alien tech. He slammed it on the podium. "I salvaged this from a wreck buried a mile beneath a Kargath storm crater. It contains black box data from my original command ship. Footage, voice logs, orders, including one that proves I tried to call off the strike. I was overridden. By who? The arbiter asked. He looked at them, let the pause simmer before speaking the name. By you, Judge Orlin. Gasps echoed. Orlin shifted in his seat, eyes hard but no longer confident. That's a lie, the man said coldly. He smiled. Say that into the box. It still works. He pressed a button. A crackling voice began to play, distorted by time and damage, but clear enough. Override confirmed. Strike authorized. Wipe it. Leave no trace. And then another voice, his own, shouting, Those aren't hostiles. Those are civilians. I'm aborting the strike. Negative. Orders confirmed. Cut transmission. He doesn't need to come back. The chamber went dead silent. The data was real. The override came from council clearance. They'd framed him. He let it sit for a moment. Let them stew in it. Then he kept going. You needed someone to blame. A fall guy to bury the operation. You fed the media a clean narrative, closed the case, and threw me to a death world to keep your hands clean? He looked back at Orlin, who was now glaring with a mix of hate and fear. And the best part? He said, voice like gravel. You didn't just leave me to die. You made sure my team was off-world. You made sure I had no weapons, no support. You made sure the landing pod disintegrated on entry. But guess what? He leaned in again, lowering his voice to a near whisper. You forgot one thing. Kargath doesn't kill men like me. Now came the part they really didn't want to hear. I learned things on that planet, he said, voice darker now. About the Accord. About what really happens to people who don't toe the line. Kargath isn't just a dumping ground, it's a laboratory, a graveyard of failed experiments. You're not just throwing people away, you're burying secrets. Judge Vexa, a slender female of the insectoid Threx species, twitched uncomfortably. You lie. Do I? He said, taking out a second item. A skull. Twisted. Elongated. Human. But not. He dropped it on the podium. A sickening clack echoed. That was a Marine. Gene-modified. Experimental batch. Abandoned on Kargath 4 years before me. I found 6 like him. Still alive. Still mutated. Still screaming. He let that sink in. So here's what's going to happen, he said, eyes scanning every seat, his voice low but sharper than any blade. You're going to release the footage to the public. You're going to expose the override. You're going to open an inquiry into every Deathworld assignment in the last 10 years. And if you don't, then I'll show the galaxy what Kargath made me capable of. There it was. Not a threat. A promise. Because he hadn't just survived, he had changed. On Kargath, he learned to kill creatures born in planetary acid storms. He built shelters out of predator bones. He stitched wounds with parasite silk. He made alliances with beasts that didn't even have names in the Accord's database. He didn't just survive Kargath, he ruled it. And now, with the codes embedded in the blood tech he wore, he could open its gates, let its monsters loose, let the galaxy see what its secrets really looked like. The Arbiter was silent for a long moment. Then it said, with a crack in its voice that hadn't been there before, If this is true, if what you say is verifiable, it is. Then the Council will reconvene. You will be given full legal immunity until the investigation is complete. You will be granted audience before the Interstellar Tribunal. He smirked. Too late for that. Why? Because this isn't about law. It's about justice. And justice isn't blind. She's just been looking the other way for too long. He turned without another word. Walked out. No applause, no cheers, just silence. But the fear in their eyes was worth more than any verdict. Behind him, chaos began to ripple. Comms flared. Judges argued. The truth had cracked their palace of lies. And he was just getting started. Outside the chamber, a small ship waited. Unmarked, ancient. Inside it sat 3 others, scarred, silent, watching. Survivors. From Kargath. He wasn't the only one who had lived. Just the first to return. The air in the ship was thick with silence. Not tension, not fear, anticipation. He stood near the cockpit, fingers tracing the console like he was drawing from memory. The ship barely held together, a relic stolen from an old mining colony outside Accord space, modified with pieces they scavenged from Kargath itself. The bones of beasts lined the bulkheads. Patches of crude armor, stitched from the hides of monsters, covered the walls. The engine growled like a living thing. It wasn't a starship. It was a weapon waiting to be aimed. Behind him sat the other 3. Silent. Watching. Just like always. Each of them carried something different. Wounds you couldn't see. Kargath had broken them, shaped them, forged them into something the galaxy didn't have a word for. But the one thing they all had in common? They had been left to die. And now they were the last thing standing between the Council and exposure. The first to speak was the man on the left, skin pale, eyes sunken but sharp like knives. His name used to be Raynor, but now they just called him Surge. He'd spent 2 years trapped in the toxic fog belts, surviving off mutated fungus and dissecting predators with sharpened bone. His voice rasped like rust on steel. They'll come for us, before the tribunal even meets. The second, Tarn, a one-armed brute with scars so deep they looked carved into stone, nodded. They'll send Black Ops. Or worse, enforcers wrapped in diplomatic immunity. You humiliated them. You think they'll just take that? The third, the quietest, was the youngest. A girl named Mira, barely 20 when she was dumped on Kargath. Used to be a translator. Now she could break a neck in 3 seconds and walk away without blinking. She didn't say much. But when she did, it mattered. They're already watching us. He didn't argue, because they were right. This wasn't over. It hadn't even begun. He turned back to the cockpit screen, pulled up the live data feed, broadcasts, media coverage, interstellar news, and there it was, just as he'd predicted. Commander of Exiled Mission returns from Deathworld Kargath, claims Council corruption. Emergency inquiry launched into past Deathworld sentences. Leaked footage reveals unauthorized strike override by military Judge Orlan. The galaxy was watching, and the Accord was bleeding. But it wasn't enough. He didn't want just inquiries. He didn't want a seat at the table or a hollow apology whispered behind closed doors. He wanted collapse. He wanted the machine that exiled him, that buried truth beneath the bones of 1,000 forgotten soldiers, to come crashing down. He tapped a control, and the ship's interface shifted to a secret database, one they had pieced together from scavenged tech, salvaged drones, and hours of decrypting corrupted files stolen from old Council black sites. The project list, over 100 names, not people, not soldiers, victims, dumped like him, silenced, erased, experiments, fall guys, whistleblowers, political threats, test subjects, and every one of them sent to die under the same official label. Exile by planetary cleansing. That was the lie they wrapped it in. But now he had proof. He had names. He had coordinates. He even had survivors. He turned to the others. We don't wait. We don't hide. We hit first. Raynor raised an eyebrow. How hard? Hard enough that they'll wish I stayed dead. The first target was a listening post orbiting Vereen 3, officially decommissioned, but actually used for off-record surveillance and deep-class black ops briefings, the kind of place used to scrub digital trails and delete people from existence. He'd been there before, years ago, back when he still believed in the Accord. They approached silent, cloaked, riding the electromagnetic noise of the nearby gas giant like a shadow in the wind. The station had minimal defenses. It was never built for war. It was built for secrecy, which made it vulnerable. He boarded with Raynor, left Tarn and Mira with the ship, ready to burn if needed. Inside, the corridors were quiet. Cold. Empty. Too empty. He felt it before he saw it, a flicker in the shadows. Movement in his peripheral. Raynor noticed, too. His voice was low. Ambush? No, cleanup. They knew we'd come. They reached the central server room and found the answer. The data cores were already fried. Glass shattered, consoles melted, the smell of ionized blood in the air. A single figure sat slumped in the main chair, a tech officer, pulse still flickering, barely alive. He knelt beside him. The man's eyes were wide, not with fear, with guilt. "I didn't want to," the tech whispered, choking on his own breath. "They said, if I didn't wipe it, they'd send me to the same place." He clenched his jaw. They already did. The man died seconds later. Raynor shook his head. "They're burning the evidence, everywhere." "Let them," he said. "It won't matter. We don't need their files. We've got us." Back aboard the ship, he gathered the others again. The galactic net was already buzzing with news of the destroyed station. The Accord blamed it on pirates. Convenient, predictable, wrong. "They think we're terrorists now," Tarn growled, his one good arm flexing around a crude blade. "Let them," he said. "Terror works both ways." Mira looked up. Her voice was quiet, but calm. "You're going to make them afraid of us?" He nodded. "I'm going to make them fear every man they left behind, every soldier they buried, every whisper they tried to erase. I'm going to turn the word Kargath into a curse they'll choke on for the rest of their lives." The next move wasn't violence. It was visibility. He hacked the Accord's civilian comm grid, using a backdoor left in old training satellites. Mira helped. She still remembered the code structures. An hour later, across 1,000 planets, a message played, a video, his face, worn, scarred, burning with rage and survival, and behind him, the skulls, the data, the voices of the others, real people, real victims. Their names were spoken aloud, one by one. And then he spoke the final words that would burn through every home, every ship, every council hearing from here to the Outer Rim. "My name is Declan Ward. I was sentenced to death without trial. I survived. I returned. And now I'm telling you the truth. Your leaders are not saviors. They are liars, murderers, and their time is up." The galaxy caught fire. Protests erupted on Accord worlds. Questions exploded on public forums. Families of lost soldiers demanded investigations. Leaked files surfaced from sympathetic insiders. Footage of strange experiments, genetic trials, disappearances, black site transfers. Every hour, another thread unraveled. Every day, another name joined the cause. Some called it rebellion. Others called it justice. He didn't care what they called it. He called it war. Then came the bounty, 50 million credits, dead or alive, issued by the council, signed by Judge Orlin himself. He laughed when he saw it. Still cheaper than the truth. But it changed things. Now bounty hunters were coming. Killers, mercs, even rogue AIs, but that was fine. Let them come. He'd survived Kargath. He was built for worse. They struck again, this time not a facility, a man. Council Commander Bralin, the one who signed off on the Kargath transport runs, who coordinated the logistics of disappearing people into a planet designed to erase them. They found him on a pleasure world. Private island, luxury dome. He was drunk. Surrounded by artificial companions and a personal shield, he died screaming, not from pain, from fear, because before they killed him, They showed him the footage of Declan Ward crawling out of a Kargath storm, naked, bleeding, teeth bared like an animal, dragging a creature twice his size by the neck. They let him understand. Then Tarn slit his throat. And now the real war begins. Not with guns, with truth. But truth sharpened by violence, delivered by the hands of the men who were never meant to come back. Declan stood before the others, watching their faces lit by the fire of 1,000 unraveling lies. "They buried us to hide their sins," he said. "Now we dig up every bone they ever broke, and we build our justice from the skeleton of their empire." The bounty changed everything. Before, the war had been whispers and shadows, a quiet reckoning unfolding across news feeds, back channels, and encrypted broadcasts, a slow bleed of truth leaking into the cracks of a rotten empire. But now it was open season. The bounty turned him into a prize, a payday, a legend with a target stamped across his spine. They weren't just hunted by soldiers anymore. Mercs, pirates, rogue AI drones, fallen colonies, everyone wanted a piece of Declan Ward. The ship had to stay in motion, never dock too long, never jump to the same system twice. Tarn slept with his blade in hand. Raynor rigged traps into the hallways. Mira rewired every firewall, rerouted signals, erased footprints like they were fighting ghosts. But even that wasn't enough, because the Council was done playing defense. They were going to make an example out of him. It started with Fort Calderon, an old military outpost deep in the asteroid field of the Kaelmar Belt, once a frontline command center during the Drakkar Rebellion, now turned into a classified research lab. Declan had suspected they'd turn it into a cover site, somewhere to hide the last of the Black Project data, maybe even a prisoner transfer hub for people they were still trying to disappear. He didn't expect to find 47 bodies when they breached it. Still warm, shot in the head, neatly, systematically. Scientists, engineers, prisoners, wiped out, not by mercs, not by defense droids, but by the Council's own cleanup teams. Raynor crouched over a child's body, no older than 12, medical restraints still on his wrists. "They knew we were coming," he muttered, voice hollow. "They killed them to make sure we couldn't prove they were alive." Tarn stood behind him, jaw clenched. His hand flexed around the hilt of his blade like he was trying not to break it in half. Mira didn't speak. She just walked through the halls, camera drone in hand, recording everything. Her hands were steady. Her face was ice. Declan stared at the scene and said nothing for a long time. Then he turned. "No more messages. No more exposure plays. We stop broadcasting. We stop begging for truth. If they want to silence us, then we show them what real silence looks like." Their next strike wasn't surgical. It was brutal. Helix Station 9, a deep space cargo nexus that smuggled Council black market tech through civilian fronts, one of the last off-the-books funding veins keeping the Accord's secret projects alive. They didn't warn the station. They didn't send a manifesto. They hit it like a hammer. Raynor breached the firewall and shut down the comms. Tarn boarded the docking bay with a plasma repeater and cleared it in minutes. Mira blew the core locks on the vault and exposed 20 tons of illegal biomod equipment, half of it tagged for experimentation on unregistered prisoners. And Declan? He broadcast the strike internally. Not to the galaxy, just to the Council. He sent them the footage, the sound of screaming, the collapse of their infrastructure, the chaos of soldiers watching their safe house fall. And then he stared into the security cam and said just one sentence. "You should have killed me clean." They thought about running after that. Mira brought it up first. Not because she was afraid, she never showed fear, but because she was smart. She knew what was coming. The Council wouldn't sit back anymore. They'd escalate, change the rules, If it meant sacrificing systems, they would. If it meant starting a war, they'd fake the provocation. They would scorch planets to kill a man like Declan Ward. "If we stay in the open," she said, "they'll burn everything around us to get to us." "They already have," Declan said. "This isn't about hiding. It's about who dies first." The next hit came harder. A bounty crew, ex-military, trained killers, outfitted with ghost tech and neural dampeners, caught them docked at a refuel station on Vora 7. 6 of them. Veterans, smart, efficient. Declan killed 4. Raynor got shot through the chest. Tarn bled from a cracked jaw and 3 broken ribs but kept swinging until the last merc drowned in his own teeth. Mira? Mira almost didn't make it. One of the hunters had her pinned, arm broken, knife to her throat. Declan caught him just before the blade made contact. He didn't shoot him. He didn't stab him. He choked him with his bare hands until the bastard stopped moving, then kept going until the sound of snapping cartilage echoed through the corridor. The aftermath wasn't just blood. It was a shift. For the first time, Mira looked shaken. Not at her injuries, not at the attack, at Declan. He didn't blink, didn't breathe heavy, didn't speak for hours after the fight, just sat there, still, coiled. She sat beside him, arm in a sling, ribs wrapped, hair crusted with blood, and finally asked the question they were all starting to wonder. "What did Kargath really do to you?" He didn't answer at first, just stared out the viewport, watching the stars drift by like ghosts. "It stripped everything human off me," he finally said, "and then it asked if I still wanted to live." She said nothing. He looked at her. I said yes. Back on the bridge, Raynor was recovering, slower than normal. The shot had passed through 2 organs, but Mira had stabilized him. Tarn sat beside him, sharpening his blade like he was filing down the memory of failure. Declan entered, silent as death. "New plan," he said. "No more scattered strikes, no more middlemen. We go for the heart." Raynor blinked. "You mean?" "Yeah, we hit the core." It was madness. The core systems weren't just fortified, they were untouchable. Shielded planets, military moons, civilian sprawl wrapped in sensor drones and orbital mines. No one attacked the core, not even the rebel colonies during the Outland break. But Declan wasn't after symbols or chaos. He was after one person, Judge Orlan, the man who signed his death warrant, the one who fed the lie, the one who whispered in the council's ear and turned a soldier into a scapegoat. He didn't want to kill Orlan. He wanted to destroy everything around him and then kill him slow enough to make it mean something. The crew didn't argue, not because they agreed with the plan, not at first, but because they knew it didn't matter anymore. Declan wasn't going to stop, and if they were going to die, they'd rather die with purpose. So they plotted. They studied schedules, communication drops, internal security paths. They bribed low-level engineers, intercepted council traffic, used blacklisted satellite ghosts to map out the Galactic Citadel from its sublevels to its air ducts. Then they found it. A window. 3 minutes. A supply shuttle. Unregistered. Blind spot in orbital defense. It was suicide. So they went in. They slipped in under cover of a meteor cluster, docked under the shuttle's ID, slid through the sub-level ventilation shafts like phantoms. Every inch of the Citadel screamed control, sleek surfaces, sterile light, armed guards. And then they saw him. Orlan, walking with 2 aides, laughing. Same smug face, same dead eyes. Declan stepped into the corridor. No speech, no declaration, just a gun raised and fired. The aides dropped. Orlan froze. Declan walked forward. Slow and silent. Orlan tried to speak, tried to explain, tried to beg. Declan pistol-whipped him across the face, hard enough to drop him. Then he grabbed him by the collar and slammed him against the wall. "You remember that day," he hissed. "Standing above me, calling me unstable, watching them drag me in chains?" Orlin whimpered. I was just following—" Declan drove his fist into the judge's stomach. "You weren't following orders. You were feeding the machine, and now the machine's eating you." He didn't kill him. Not right away. He cuffed him, dragged him, broadcasted his face across every council feed. "This is your system. This is your justice. Look at what it protects." Then he left. Explosives were set on every major control relay in the Citadel's lower decks. They burned the core from within. The Citadel didn't fall. But it shook, and with it, so did the Accord. They didn't kill him, and that was the mistake. The Galactic Council didn't kill Declan Ward the moment he returned. They hesitated. Maybe it was pride, maybe it was fear, maybe they thought he was just another bitter veteran lashing out at ghosts. But now the ghosts had names, the fires had faces, and the war had begun. The aftermath of the Citadel raid was chaos wrapped in confusion. The feeds showed Orlin's face beaten and broken, streaming live to every corner of Accord space. Council security scrambled to cut the signal, but Declan had used 3 dead-man relays and a coded transmission bouncing off pre-collapse satellites. By the time they blacked it out, it had been copied over 5 million times. In one day, Orlin went from war hero to traitor. His override order during the Drakkar strike was exposed, civilian casualties confirmed, evidence of secret courts, Deathworld sentencing without trial, a systematic process of silence and burial, masquerading as law. The public couldn't look away. But the council? They stopped pretending. The retaliation started within 12 hours. They hit hard and fast. Mira was the first to catch the signal. 2 incoming destroyers, unmarked, approaching under stealth field. Not bounty hunters this time. Military. The Accord had finally said it out loud. Kill him. Burn everything around him. No more half measures. Declan didn't blink. Raynor rerouted power to shields. Tarn manned the turrets. Mira took the helm. They weren't outgunned. They were outnumbered. It didn't matter. They'd lived through Kargath. These destroyers were built for planetary suppression, not for ghosts who knew how to slit throats in the dark. The first engagement was a blur of light and thunder. The ship, cobbled together from stolen tech, alien bone, and Kargath crystal, moved like a predator. Tarn unleashed plasma hell from the belly guns, punching holes in their flanking vessel. Mira dropped them between asteroids so tight the destroyers scraped their shields raw. And Declan? He watched. He waited. Until one of the ships cracked, hull breach, signal spike, moment of chaos. Then he launched himself from the pod. One man, one suit, one mission. The boarding tube punched through the damaged corridor like a spear. And then Declan Ward was inside their ship. He didn't fire at first. He walked. Let them hear his boots on the steel. Let them wonder why one man had the balls to walk into a destroyer alone. They came at him in waves, black-armored soldiers, guns raised, shouting orders. He dropped the first with a knife to the throat, shot the next 2 through the visor before their helmets fully closed. The rest ran. Because there was something in his eyes, something worse than rage. Purpose. He wasn't there to win. He was there to send a message. You will never be safe again. Back on his own ship, the others held the second destroyer off long enough for Declan to finish the job. He rigged the enemy's reactor to blow, left a flare that spelled one word in red letters across their main display. Judgment! The blast cracked the asteroid belt. The second destroyer broke off pursuit and limped away with half its crew dead and 3 decks venting into space. They didn't chase after it. Declan wasn't interested in survivors today. Today was about clarity. The Accord had made it official. There would be no redemption, only revenge. In the following days, the galaxy changed. Council fleets repositioned. Civilians were warned to avoid border systems. New laws passed, rapid emergency decrees written in panic. Martial law on 11 Outer Rim colonies. Dozens of journalists detained for sharing classified rebellion propaganda. The Council's narrative shifted from containment to control. And people noticed. Because when truth gets buried deep enough, it starts to stink. Inside their ship, patched up, bleeding coolant, cloaked in solar interference, the crew regrouped. Raynor was walking again. Tarn's knuckles still bruised from the boarding defense. Mira sat quietly, watching system updates roll across the screen. Declan stood in the center of the room, eyes closed, as if listening to something only he could hear. "You said it once," Mira said. "This wasn't about law, it was about justice." "It still is," he answered. "But what's justice now?" she asked. "Because I don't think this is just about Orlan anymore." She was right, and he knew it. It had started as revenge. One man, one judge, one corrupt system. But now? Now it was bigger. Now the word Kargath meant something. It was a banner, a warning, a scar across the galaxy's perfect face. Ex-soldiers were reaching out. Disavowed medics. Engineers who worked in silent labs and never asked why their co-workers kept disappearing. Families of people listed as missing without explanation. All of them wanted the same thing. Retribution. Raynor cracked a smile as he leaned back against the console. "You've become a cause, boss. You're not just Declan Ward anymore. You're the ghost they tried to bury." Declan didn't smile. "Causes don't bleed." Tarn stood beside him, arms crossed. "So what's next?" Next came the list. Declan dropped it onto the central console, a sequence of encrypted files, some barely readable, others with location data embedded in corrupted metadata. Every black site prison they ever ran, every facility used for Deathworld processing, every outpost where someone was sent to disappear. The list wasn't complete, but it didn't need to be. Just enough to start a fire no one could put out. They divided it up. Raynor handled the inner colonies, used contacts from his days in logistics to feed the right people, the right coordinates. Mira crafted a digital bomb, not a virus but a truth spreader, an AI-driven archive that released video, documents, victim lists, and audio evidence in timed intervals. Every time the Council shut one down, 5 more would light up. Tarn gathered names, not just soldiers, but victims, survivors, people who had nothing left to lose. He gave them a target, gave them Declan's name, gave them a reason. And Declan? He prepared for the final move. Because it was coming. He could feel it in the air, a shift. The Council had gone from defense to offense. Now they were organizing something bigger, something final, a purge, not just of his crew, but anyone connected to Kargath. Any survivor, any sympathizer, anyone who dared speak the name out loud. They were going to burn the truth to the ground and salt the ashes. Declan knew what that meant. One last strike. One place. The core control hub. It wasn't just a command center. It was the data artery, the center point of military movement, information blackouts, and Deathworld sentencing protocols. Shut that down, and the entire machine goes blind. But it wouldn't be easy. This time they'd be ready. Declan didn't care. Let them bring everything. He'd already died once. Everything after that was just vengeance on borrowed time. He walked into the ship's war room and laid out the plan. No speech, no poetry, just the facts. They're going to erase every trace of us. We don't let them. We hit them hard, fast, and public. We leave nothing standing. He looked around at the others, Raynor, Mira, Tarn, each one scarred, loyal, and dangerous in their own way. They nodded. No hesitation. No fear. Just clarity. Because they weren't just a crew anymore. They were a reckoning. The core control hub wasn't just defended. It was impenetrable. Built into the shell of a moon in the Varnus system, it controlled every classified operation in the Accord, from planetary surveillance to Deathworld logistics. 70% of the galaxy's hidden infrastructure flowed through it. It was a vault of lies pretending to be a security center. And it was next. Declan stood over the holomap of the hub, arms folded, jaw tight. "This is it," he said. "We take this down, we don't just cripple them, we expose every black file, every kill order, every secret tribunal. They can't hide anymore." "What if it's a trap?" Mira asked, arms crossed, hair still damp from welding new armor panels. "It is," Raynor said, "but that's not the question." He looked at Declan. "The question is, do we care?" Declan didn't blink. No. They planned for 3 days. There were no weak points, no forgotten access shafts or outdated ports. Everything had been upgraded in response to the raid on the Citadel. Declan had forced their hand. They'd tightened every security parameter, added double layers to their shield rings, even rotated internal staff on AI randomized shifts. But the more complex a system, the more fragile it becomes. That was Mira's domain. "They've gone digital on everything," she said, "which means they've made a mistake." "What mistake?" Tarn asked, sharpening his blade with quiet menace. She smiled, just barely. "They trust the code." Phase 1 was insertion. They cloaked their ship beneath a decaying freighter registered to a defunct mining company. The cover held. They got close. Too close. Phase 2 was infiltration. Declan and Mira boarded via an old maintenance arm meant for docking external satellites. It wasn't on the station's current internal maps. Mira had found it in an archived file buried on a backup server 2 galaxies away. "They'll patch it after this," she said as they moved through the tight crawl space, darkness pressing in. "They won't get the chance," Declan said. Phase 3, split and cripple. Mira went to the control stacks, the AI banks that ran internal defense. She wasn't just going to disable them, she was going to turn them against their own staff. Meanwhile, Declan moved to the vault level. Alone. It wasn't just data he was after. The Council stored physical copies of its oldest Deathworld sentences here. Real names. Real paper. Scanned but never digitized, never touched by code. It was the only part of their system still human, and that made it dangerous to them. If those files got out, it would prove they'd been executing without due process for decades. So naturally, Declan was going to burn it all down. Tarn and Raynor hit the outer ring. They didn't sneak. They hit like thunder. Explosives planted on cargo elevators, outer corridors rigged with collapsible mines. Tactical teams swarmed in response, elite, armored, augmented, but Raynor and Tarn didn't back off. "We don't need to win," Raynor growled into his comm. "We just need to keep them looking at us." And they did. Inside the vault level, Declan moved like a ghost. Security was dense. He counted 20 guards in full armor before even breaching the first door. He didn't avoid them. He erased them. The first 4 died before they could scream. Knife, throat, silence. The next 6 went down in a hall choke point, stunned by an improvised pulse bomb, then executed one by one. When he reached the final vault, his uniform was soaked, not with his blood, but theirs. He touched the override panel. "Mira, you in?" "I'm in," she replied, breathing hard. "AI's looping camera feeds. You've got 5 minutes before it catches on." "Plenty." The vault opened with a hiss. Rows of old-world storage. Black books, files, Prisoner manifests, handwritten notes from judges who'd long since died, their cruelty still archived. He grabbed 3 packs, stuffed them. But then, one caught his eye. File 883C, he opened it, and froze. It was his name, Ward Declan. But the date on it wasn't the date of his sentencing. It was 4 years earlier. "What the hell?" he muttered, flipping through the yellowed papers. The strike at Drakkar, the civilian deaths, the override order. But the signature on the sentencing form wasn't Orlan. It was someone else. Chief Arbiter Solon. He blinked. Orlan had overridden his orders, yes, but the sentence had been pre-written. 4 years before the strike, before the war even ended. They'd marked him for erasure long before anything had happened. He wasn't a scapegoat. He was a loose end. "Mira," he growled into the comm. "Patch me into the ship." "Now's not a good time," she grunted. "I've got a firewall trying to recompile inside my skull." "Now, Mira." She cursed and redirected. Raynor's voice crackled through. "Boss?" This wasn't just a betrayal. It was planned, before Drakkar, before the war ended. "They wrote my death in advance." "What?" "They were never going to let me live. I knew too much. I asked too many questions during the Deep Strike campaigns. Biological tests, civilian cover-ups. They didn't want a hero. They wanted a goddamn execution." There was silence. Then Tarn's low voice. "Then we finish this for every name they buried." Alarms blared. Mira had triggered the AI loopback, and it worked too well. The system collapsed into conflict with itself, misreading personnel as intruders. Auto-turrets activated. Internal drones fired blindly. Panic spread. It was time to run. Declan grabbed the packs, strapped them tight, and moved. But as he reached the corridor, he found someone waiting. Council Commander Threx Vaughn, the man responsible for managing Deathworld logistics. Gray uniform, tall, calm. He held no weapon. "You shouldn't have come," Vaughn said. Declan didn't stop. "Move. We warned them not to underestimate you, but they never listened. You always had a flaw, though. Do you want to know what it is?" Declan's hand twitched toward his pistol. "You still think this can be fixed?" "No," Declan said. "I just want it to end." He fired twice. Vaughn dropped. No speech, no delay, just justice. They regrouped in the extraction corridor. Raynor limped, blood leaking from his thigh. Tarn carried him half the way. Mira emerged with a cracked visor, one eye swollen, her expression blank. Declan handed her the packs. "Get this to every channel." "What about you?" she asked. He looked back down the corridor, toward the heart of the station, where the pulse reactor powered everything. "I'm going to make sure no one ever rebuilds this place." They begged him to wait, to let the explosives do the work, to come with them. But he was already walking. Raynor didn't argue, he just saluted. Tarn nodded once, a silent goodbye. Mira looked like she was going to stop him, but she didn't. She handed him a flare, red crystal fuse, wired with liquid fire. "Make it beautiful," she said. He entered the core alone. The hallway was slick with steam, red lights strobing. He reached the power chamber, wired the explosives, and as the timer started ticking, he stood in the center, staring into the humming energy vortex that powered the most corrupt system the galaxy had ever built. "You buried me," he whispered, "but I dug myself out." He lit the flare and let the fire take him. The explosion rocked the moon, ripped through the core, shattered every relay. The control hub didn't just fall, it disappeared. Across the galaxy, systems blacked out. Deathworld logistics froze. Tribunal courts went silent. Cover-up trails collapsed. The machine was dead. And Declan Ward? He became myth. The galaxy didn't pause, not for the explosion, not for the dead, not even for Declan Ward. The core control hub was gone. An entire moon, stripped clean from existence in under 6 seconds. The blast registered across 5 sectors. Power grids went dark. Satellite feeds flickered. Civilian channels went silent. For a moment, it felt like the galaxy itself had exhaled. And in that silence, the whispers started. He did it. Declan Ward brought it down. The Council's untouchable core is ashes. Kargath didn't kill him. He killed it. The crew didn't speak for a long time after the blast. They sat in the ship, drifting far from the wreck site, systems dark, everything offline except for life support and a single beacon broadcasting one message on repeat. The war is not over, but the lie is dead. Mira sat at the edge of the comms room, eyes fixed on nothing, hands clenched so tightly her knuckles looked carved from bone. Raynor lay on a stretcher. The med drone hissed as it stitched the hole in his leg. Tarn didn't move from the cockpit. He just stared into space, that familiar Kargath emptiness in his expression again. The look of a man watching the universe twist into something uglier than he thought it could be. No one dared say it, but it burned in every heartbeat. Declan Ward was gone. It wasn't supposed to hurt this much. He had said it himself, over and over. I died already. Kargath just let me walk a little longer. But none of them believed it. Not really. Because he was the fire that lit their path, the voice that tore through silence, the force that refused to kneel. He was the one who came back from hell and made everyone else believe they could too. And now? Now the fire was out. Or so it seemed. Mira was the first to move. She pulled herself up, brushed blood from her forehead, and dragged the remaining data packs into the upload chamber. Her ribs ached. Her arm trembled. But her eyes were clear. He didn't die for symbols, she muttered. He died so people could see. She activated the relay. The upload began, and with it, the truth. They didn't release a speech. No final message, no polished documentary. They dropped raw files, names, coordinates, video logs, footage of council operatives executing prisoners, voice recordings of judges ordering covert Deathworld exiles, lab reports on failed human experimentation, audio of Declan himself, recorded secretly while bleeding in a Kargath cave, muttering the one thing that haunted him. Justice doesn't live in the light. It crawls out of graves. The effect was immediate and violent. 16 colonies declared independence in under 24 hours. Council communication hubs were raided by their own citizens. Protesters turned to insurgents. Council police stations burned. Someone hacked into the public memorial servers and carved a new entry into the hero wall. Declan Ward, dead once, resurrected by truth. They called it the Kargath Rebellion. They weren't wrong. Tarn stood outside the ship one evening, just beyond orbit, hovering near the shattered remains of the core moon. He didn't wear a suit. He didn't need to. They were docked in a field bubble Mira rigged together with black market tech. He stared at the debris, silent. It wasn't sadness in his eyes, not anger either. It was clarity. You did what I couldn't, he whispered. You made dying mean something. He lit a flare, tossed it into space. It drifted, slowly burning red as it vanished into the void. A funeral with no prayer, just fire. Exactly how Declan would have wanted it. Raynor took longer to recover, physically and mentally. He never cried. He never said anything sentimental. He just sat beside the burned-up pilot seat, fixing things that didn't need fixing, tightening bolts that weren't loose, staring at Declan's empty chair like it might fill itself if he looked long enough. We used to joke he was half ghost, he finally said, voice cracked and quiet. Turns out we were wrong. He was just more real than the rest of us. But it was Mira who carried the burden. The broadcasts, the networks, the resistance cells forming across systems. She was the one feeding them, giving them intelligence, coordinates, access to files. She became the signal Declan once was. But even with all her strength, there was one thing she couldn't shake. Guilt. "I should have gone with him," she said one night, staring at the stars, knuckles white from gripping a stim canister. "He wouldn't have let you," Raynor said, limping in behind her. "That's not the point." "No," Tarn said, stepping in. "The point is, you're not done. And neither are we." 2 days later, the ship received a transmission. Unmarked, encrypted in Kargath glyphs. No one should have known that language. It was raw, primal, crafted by survival and madness on a planet designed to erase memory. Mira cracked it anyway. One sentence appeared on screen. "If you're reading this, then I failed to die." Everyone froze. The message wasn't live. It was a data fragment, embedded in the packs Declan sent out. Mira had missed it the first time, buried behind layers of code designed to destroy themselves if tampered with. It played as audio. His voice, raspy, half-broken, but alive. "There's a chance this reaches no one, and if that's the case, then I deserve that silence. But if it finds you, if you're hearing this, then I need you to know something. I didn't do this for glory, or payback, or even justice. I did it because someone had to be the first one to stand up and say, 'Enough.' They tried to make me a corpse, so I became a reckoning instead. Keep going. Don't turn it into a banner. Turn it into a blade." Raynor didn't move. Tarn closed his eyes. Mira whispered, "You bastard." And then she smiled. Across the stars, the rebellion spread. Cells formed from exiled engineers, blacklisted soldiers, and families of the disappeared. They weren't coordinated, but they were dangerous. Because they weren't fighting for planets or titles. They were fighting for the truth. They wore no uniform. But they all said the same thing when they struck. "This is for Declan Ward. This is for Kargath. This is for the ones you tried to erase." The council began to fracture. One judge resigned. 2 were assassinated by unknown hands. Several mid-tier officials defected and gave public confessions, claiming they were only following protocol, but it was too late. The protocol was dead. The people didn't want apologies. They wanted vengeance. Months passed. Raynor trained new rebels in tactics he learned during his time running ghost ops. Tarn led raids on black sites still operating in the outer systems. Mira created a new network, encrypted through solar flares and coded in Declan's old voice patterns. They called it the Echo. Each message began the same way. "This isn't over." But even as the war grew, there was always one question Mira never stopped asking. What if he survived? They never found a body. The explosion was massive, yes, enough to vaporize steel. But this was Declan Ward, the man who survived the unspeakable. The man who crawled out of a death world with nothing but hate in his veins and truth on his back. And Mira, she had a theory. The flare she gave him, it was Kargath tech. Bioreactive. It could burn hotter than a sun but collapse into stasis if triggered right. And Declan? He always found a way out. So she searched, not openly, quietly, system by system, signal by signal, every ghost ping, every unidentified beacon, every piece of rogue code that looked even slightly like him. She searched, because deep down, beneath the rebellion, beneath the blood and fire, she believed. And one day, on a dead satellite orbiting a forgotten system, a signal pulsed 3 times. Short, long, short. A code she knew. Kargath. Declan. Alive? Or just an echo? She didn't know. but she stared at it for a long time, then smiled. He's not done. The signal pulsed again. Short, long, short, faint, fuzzy, old tech. It wasn't a distress call. It wasn't automated. It was manual, a hand-built beacon tapped into the dead bandwidth of a forgotten satellite, tucked just beyond the edge of the Traxus Divide. A system known for ghost ships and radiation storms. And yet, the signature was clear. Kargath glyphs. A specific sequence Mira had hard-coded into the flare she'd given Declan. The same flare he used before the core control hub exploded. Raynor leaned over her shoulder as she replayed it for the third time. You think it's him? Mira didn't answer. She didn't know. She didn't want to know, because if it was, then that meant Declan Ward didn't die a martyr. He disappeared for a reason. And if it wasn't him, then it was someone else using his fire. They jumped to the edge of the signal's origin. Wreckage drifted like bone dust across the void. Burned freighters, dead satellites, leftover debris from old battles no one remembered. No light, no heat, just ruin. The ship moved slow, cloaked, sensors muted. Mira's fingers trembled on the console, even as she forced her expression blank. Raynor kept one hand on his sidearm. Tarn, as always, said nothing. He just watched the black, waiting for it to move. They found the source in orbit, a station, small, crude, not Accord tech, built by hand. Kargath style, it was made of pieces, steel torn from black-site stations, bones lashed to hull supports, panels stitched from predator hide. A flag drifted lazily off one of the comm towers, red, black, and scorched at the edges. The symbol was simple. A knife through a council seal. Below it, scrawled in jagged Kargath glyphs, were 4 words. We remember the buried. They docked. Guns ready. Silence wrapped around them like smoke as they stepped into the airlock. The doors hissed open. Inside, flickering lights revealed a makeshift command center. Jury-rigged consoles, scavenged generators, maps of council territories marked with red slashes and timestamps, handwritten lists of operations, all ones Mira recognized. Some they had run, some they hadn't. This isn't just a hideout, Raynor muttered. It's a command post. Tarn pointed at the wall. Photos, faces, names, exiles, survivors, fighters. Underneath them, scratched in deep, ugly strokes. The dead don't forgive. A figure stepped into the light. He wasn't armed. He wasn't armored. But Mira stopped breathing, because the eyes were the same. Colder. Harder. But the same. Hello? The man said. His voice was worn, dragged across gravel and rust. I didn't think you'd come. Mira's knees almost buckled. You, Raynor blinked. It's you. Tarn didn't speak. He just lowered his blade, slowly. Declan Ward stepped forward. Alive. Scarred, but alive. He looked different, lean, paler, skin stitched with what looked like bio-wiring. His left hand wasn't flesh anymore. It was wrapped in alloy, crudely built from Deathworld remnants. The flare worked, Mira whispered. Declan nodded. Took longer than I wanted. Core explosion broke half my ribs, crushed my leg. But the flare triggered the stasis lock. Buried me in a shield bubble. He gestured to the station. Crawled out a week later. Built this with what I could salvage. Why not signal us sooner? Raynor asked, still staring like he wasn't sure it was real. Declan's face darkened. Because I needed to know the fire would spread without me. And it did. The reunion wasn't soft. It wasn't emotional. There were no hugs, just eyes, nods, respect, because they weren't children. They weren't family. They were soldiers born from fire and betrayal. And now they were back under the same roof. The rebellion was burning through the stars. Every week, another outpost fell. Another system flipped. The council had begun collapsing from the inside. Multiple resignations, assassinations, entire military wings defecting. Exiled officers were returning, not to be heroes, but to finish what they started. Declan didn't want to lead them. He wanted to end it. "The council still has one stronghold," he said, pointing to a red circle on the map, a hidden base outside the Veltrax rift. A deep space stronghold where they stored the Central Archive, a backup of every black project, every hidden strike order, every erased name. If they could get to that archive, they could prove the council's crimes across generations. "We don't just burn them," Declan said. "We erase their right to exist." The plan was suicide. A frontal strike wouldn't work. But Mira had a solution. "We infect them, not with code, with memory." They used Declan's signal, the same one pulsing through the rebellion, as a Trojan horse. Buried inside it, every file, every log, every list of council atrocities. Once uploaded to the Central Archive, it would auto-sync across every remaining official system. Truth, forced into the bloodstream. And then? They'd wipe the servers clean with a blast. The final mission started 2 weeks later. 4 ships, all rebels, coordinated strike. One goal? Kill the past. The Central Archive didn't go quietly. They met resistance, elite black units, engineered war beasts, drones running outdated human pain simulations. But Declan moved through them like a ghost with purpose. Tarn took point, tearing through lines like a blood-soaked juggernaut. Raynor and Mira uploaded the payload. Time was running out. "We're in," Mira said. 5%, 10, 25. Alarms screamed, explosives armed, gunfire howled. 50, 70. Raynor took a shot to the shoulder but didn't stop. 95. And then Declan's voice, low and final. "Run." They sprinted. The explosion lit the void like a supernova. Every council server, every system tied to the Central Archive, crashed. Memory blocks wiped. Lies exposed. Criminal orders broadcast to every civilian node. The Empire fell in a single breath. Months later, peace was not declared. There was no peace, but there was change. The council was gone, its survivors hunted, its structure dismantled. Kargath became a symbol, not of death, but of truth surviving destruction. Declan didn't take power. He didn't crown himself. He disappeared again, left Mira, Raynor, and Tarn to handle the rebuilding. Some say he died a second time. Some say he waits on a new Deathworld building again. Some say he watches the stars, making sure the lie never returns. No one knows for sure. But they remember what he said in that final broadcast. "You can bury a man, but you can't bury what he left behind. Not if it crawls out of the ground with a knife and a name." The name was Declan Ward, and the galaxy never forgot it.